Working the graveyard shift as the night auditor at the Whispering Pines Motor Lodge, a rotting, single-story horseshoe of decaying cinderglock and faded yellow paint marooned on a desolate, lightless stretch of Interstate 80 in Nevada, was a profound exercise in purgatorial stagnation. A place where the air perpetually tasted of stale menthol cigarettes, heavily chlorinated pool water, and the cheap synthetic pine aerosol I used to mask the lingering scent of transient desperation. For nearly a year, my existence was confined to the cramped, bulletproof glass enclosed front desk, my nights measured out in the rhythmic, hypnotic buzzing of the flickering pink neon vacancy sign outside, and the static-filled hum of a miniature black and white security monitor that displayed nothing but the empty, cracked asphalt of the parking lot. The suffocating, predictable monotony of the desert night fundamentally shattered at precisely 4:12 a.m. when the heavy, plastic rotary phone on the front desk violently rang, the harsh mechanical bell shattering the silence of the lobby. The illuminated red light on the switchboard indicating the call was coming from room 114, a room I knew for an absolute documented fact I had not rented out in over 3 weeks due to a severe, recurring black mold problem. I cautiously lifted the heavy receiver to my ear, expecting the drunken, mistaken dialing of a trucker from a neighboring room, but the line was utterly devoid of human speech. Instead, it was filled with a deep, rhythmic, incredibly wet suctioning noise, accompanied by the horrific, distinct sound of thick, heavy bones being slowly ground against a massive, coarse grinding stone, followed by a wet, gargling gasp that sounded like a drowning man desperately trying to scream through a lungful of boiling mud. Assuming a squatter had somehow broken the deadbolt and suffered a massive medical emergency, I grabbed the heavy ring of master keys and my heavy tactical flashlight, stepping out of the artificially cooled lobby and into the suffocating, sweltering 100-degree heat of the Nevada night, immediately noticing that the sharp, familiar smell of desert sagebrush had been entirely replaced by the hot, gag-inducing coppery stench of an open slaughterhouse drain, mixed with the sickly sweet aroma of rapidly decaying pork. As I approached the peeling, dark green door of room 114, the metal master key trembled violently in my sweating hand because the solid wooden door was actively, rhythmically expanding and contracting, bowing outward against its heavy iron hinges in perfect synchronization with a deep, muffled, throbbing heartbeat that was vibrating directly up through the cracked concrete walkway and right into the soles of my boots. I shoved the key into the lock and violently pushed the door open, the hinges screaming with the sound of tearing metal, only to have my flashlight beam cut through an atmosphere so thick, humid, and impossibly hot that my uniform shirt instantly plastered itself to my sweating skin, the beam illuminating a horrific, mind-shattering reality that fundamentally broke my understanding of basic architecture and biological limitation. The cheap, floral-patterned wallpaper of the motel room had completely peeled away, revealing that the underlying drywall had mutated into a massive, cavernous expanse of bruised, pulsating, dark red muscle tissue, actively weeping a clear, acidic, viscous mucus that was rapidly pooling on the stained, brown shag carpet. I stood, absolutely frozen in the doorway, unable to force my lungs to draw breath as I looked toward the center of the room where the cheap, queen-sized spring mattress was supposed to be. Instead,
The bed had violently expanded into a massive, quivering, fleshy mound of raw, exposed, translucent stomach lining and fused directly into the center of this biological altar was the horrific, agonizingly conscious mass of a human being. It was a man, or at least the raw, stripped biological materials of a man. His skin completely dissolved to reveal glistening, twitching red musculature, his body hopelessly embedded waist-deep into the porous, acidic flesh of the mattress, which was actively, rhythmically sucking and digesting his lower half with a deafening, wet, squelching noise. As the flashlight beam hit his exposed, lidless, violently twitching eyes, his jaw unhinged with a sickening, wet snap, dropping to his sternum as thick, white, parasitic, tapeworm-like tendrils erupted from his open mouth, frantically whipping and tasting the humid air, before he let out a multi-layered, digitized, gurgling shriek that sounded exactly like the dial-up modem of a dying computer, crossed with the squeal of a slaughtered pig. Driven entirely by pure, unadulterated lizard-brain terror, I stumbled backward, desperately slamming the heavy wooden door shut, but the door frame itself had softened and turned fleshy, the door sinking uselessly into the pulsating, bruised meat of the jamb as a dozen long, thick, prehensile tongues of raw muscle violently erupted from the edges of the door frame, actively trying to wrap around my wrists and drag me back into the boiling, acidic darkness of the room.
I violently ripped my arm free, tearing the sleeve of my uniform shirt, and sprinted blindly down the exterior concrete walkway of the motel. But the entire horseshoe-shaped structure of the Whispering Pines was actively waking up, a colossal, segmented subterranean parasite disguised as a roadside inn, finally beginning its massive nocturnal feeding cycle. As I ran past the other rooms, I watched in weeping, mind-shattering horror as every single green wooden door violently burst open simultaneously, not pushed by human hands, but blown outward by the massive, fleshy, churning expansion of the digesting biomatter within. A torrential, boiling tidal wave of rust-colored stomach acid and half-melted human remains, violently flooding out of the rooms and cascading like a horrific waterfall down onto the cracked asphalt of the parking lot. I slipped and fell hard onto the concrete, scraping my palms raw, just as I witnessed the heavy, rusted metal ice machine at the end of the walkway violently buckle and explode, violently regurgitating thousands of perfectly cubed frozen blocks of dark, coagulated human blood and shattered, jagged teeth that rained down around me with the deafening clatter of a horrific hailstorm. The overwhelming, cacophonous noise was completely maddening, a deafening blend of grinding concrete, the wet, tearing sounds of mutating architecture, and the synchronized, multi-layered, eternally suffering screams of the dozens of weary travelers and families whose bodies were currently being violently melted down and woven into the massive, subterranean, fleshy hive mind of the motor lodge. I desperately scrambled to my feet, ignoring the searing pain in my blistered palms, and threw myself over the metal railing of the second-floor walkway, plummeting 15 feet down to the ground, desperately hoping to reach my rusted sedan parked under the flickering neon sign, the only possible escape route from this isolated terrestrial nightmare. I hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact, but the cracked, sun-baked asphalt of the parking lot was no longer solid stone. It had completely softened into a massive, spongy, acidic, dark gray membrane that actively squished and depressed under my weight, acting exactly like the sticky, inescapable surface of a colossal, cosmic fly trap. And my car, my only escape, was already sinking hood deep into the actively digesting fleshy pavement. I desperately tried to pull my heavy boots free from the soft, sticky, acidic membrane of the parking lot. my soul's actively hissing and melting against the corrosive biological surface, but it was completely useless. The entire surface of the lot violently buckled and heaved, throwing me flat onto my back as massive, towering, jagged pillars of calcified white bone violently erupted from the ground all around me, forming a colossal, rib-like cage over the entire motor lodge. The massive, flickering pink neon vacancy sign towering above the property suddenly shattered in a shower of sparks, revealing a massive, glowing, bioluminescent yellow eye embedded directly in the fleshy, muscular stalk of the signpost, its slit-like pupil locking directly onto my thrashing, helpless body with an ancient, starving, predatory malice that completely shattered the remaining fragile fragments of my human sanity. From the boiling, acidic, fleshy darkness of the surrounding rooms, a massive, towering amalgamation of woven human anatomy violently dragged itself out into the parking lot. It was a horrifying, arachnid-like monstrosity constructed entirely from tightly braided cords of raw muscle, pulsing blue veins, and the screaming, assimilated, stretched faces of the motel guests, its multiple, jagged bone claws splashing heavily through the acidic pools as it advanced on me with impossible, physics-defying speed. The creature lunged, its massive, fleshy appendages wrapping violently and inescapably around my torso, the jagged, broken ribs protruding from its mass, effortlessly piercing my skin and muscle, physically dragging my screaming, helplessly bleeding body directly into its central mass, where hundreds of unhinged, skin-covered jaws eagerly waited to rip me apart. The agonizing, blinding pain was absolute as I was violently pulled headfirst into the boiling, black, acidic ocean of the creature's massive digestive cavity. My flesh instantly melting, my bones rapidly softening, my mind violently shattering into a million pieces as my individual consciousness was brutally, painfully, and eternally integrated into the writhing, screaming, hungry hive mind of the Whispering Pines Motor Inn, a permanent, agonized resident waiting in the walls for the next tired traveler to pull off the highway.